BC-2nd, or Nine Laments, by Liu Xiang. 1. Feng Fen, or Encountering Troubles. Thus speaks the last scion of Bo Yung's line, Chu Yun, the truly faithful-hearted. Tracing my ancestry from Gao Yang, I am the kindred of King Huai of Chu. A virtuous nature I received at birth, and exalted with fair fame my life's long road. My name made me equal of the earth and sky. In brightness I rivaled the starry firmament. I sucked pure essences and spewed out earthy humors. Thrown on an evil world, I held no truce with it. And for sounding men's metal without fear or favor, I was turned out and lies were told about me. My prince gave ear to falsehood and spurned the truth, rejected my counsels and followed his own bent. My proud heart burning was choked with rage. My high hopes, shattered, came tumbling down. His feckless mind could find no place for me. His person freezingly withdrew from me. Crestfallen, I took leave of my dear prince, to sigh by marsh's edge and river's brink. Though Pepper and Cassia were snared and overthrown, they still kept faith and turned towards the truth. Then, though slanderers everywhere thrive like a creeping weed, why should not I still bear my soul to him? He had plighted troth with me in the temple hall. Then, in mid-course, he went back on his word. The orchids and asarum which I held in my bosom, I scattered away as I walked in the wilderness. With loud lament I yearned for my native mountains. With grieving heart I longed for my native land. I wished I could find him alone and speak my heart, but the path to him was dark and the road was blocked. With looks all leaden and ravaged over, with spirit broken and aged before my time, with a skirt that flapped, bellying in the breeze, with robe dragging heavily in the dew, I went down to the rushing flood of the river, followed the waves' crests ever downwards, threading my way round the curves of the mountains, till the whirlwind came with blusterous roaring. I drove my chariot to the Black Rock Mountain, trotted my horses by the Dongting Lake. At daybreak, I started out from Tsangwu. At evening, I sheltered at Castle in the Rocks. Hibiscus was my awning, of water caltrops my car. My tower was of spotted shells, my hall of jade. Fig leaves were my hangings, my mats were of Lu stone. My coat was of fish scales, my skirt of the rainbow. I climbed up Feng Long and looked downwards, and saw how far behind I had left the city. Longing for the old ways of my home in Nanying, my bowels in a single night turned 9 times over. Far and wide the great waves roll, swelling and curving towards the east. My heart is desolate with long yearning. My mind is clouded over and daily growing feebler. Thick falls the frost and mantles all things over, and keen the autumn wind blows, mournful and chill. While my body wanders on, never returning, my soul flies far from it, vexed with constant sorrow. Lament. Even as the rushing water roars with the crash of boulders, and the waves sweep up and surge, and the rapids boil and race, whipped to wild frenzy, plunging in foaming flood, dashing on jagged rocks, swirling and circling, whirling and eddying, hurling frustrated at that which confines them. So Chu Yun, meeting with many misfortunes, falling on dire disgrace, poured out his wondrous words in writing to leave to posterity. 2. Li Shi, or Leaving the World. The loved one does not know me. The loved one hears me not. I went to the loved one's fathers and spoke to the loved one's ghosts. The loved one turned himself from me, but lent ear to the flatterer. I made heaven and earth bear witness, and the four seasons testify. I commanded the sun and moon to shine on me a little longer, and held the dipper's handle as pledge of my good faith. I appointed Shi Kuang to sound the truth of my words, and ordered Gao Yao to listen as his assessor. I was given by Shellcrack the name of True Exemplar, and by Yarrowstalks the title of Divine Balance. The lofty virtues I had in my youth already, I strengthened and refined when I grew to manhood. I would not follow the halting gait of the vulgar. I made my direction straight and was faithful to my purpose, not taking my line off the true to follow the crooked, or humbling my pure mind in my daily dealings. My actions were as true as flawless jade is, as I followed in the tracks of the chariot of state, but the crowd made dark the light with their sycophancies, and the chariot of state was overturned in the murk. In mid-career, the chariot swerved from its course. The team of four took fright and ran amok. With the driver no more able to control them, the yoke was bound to break and the box of the car to be smashed. Bridles from bits snapped as they raced on wildly. At the stage stops none dared stand and try to halt them. And so, with the road clear ahead and no human interference, they could gallop on unchecked for 1,000 li. Cast rudely down into low obscurity, unable ever to mount up again, I nothing cared about my own degradation. I only grieved that the coach of state should founder. I passed from the city gate and took my bearings, still hoping my prince would change his mind and recall me. Alas, that the driver's life should be so afflicted. Sorrow often his lot, calamity his portion. 9 long years went by, without my recalling. I thought of Peng Xian on his watery wanderings, of Shi Yan floating among the river's ayuts, and went down into the Mi Luo's flowing waters. I tried to follow the river's mazy windings, but dashed on the jagged rocks, and was driven athwart my course. The roaring waves, curving their broken crests above me, spun me drifting through the long shallows' turbid waters. As I rode the Huang Tuo downwards towards the sea, how I wished the flood would reverse and carry me homewards, but the waves' black chariots, swiftly thronging, bore me drifting on ever farther from it. I rowed my boat across the river, crossing the Xiang's waters, and journeyed to the south. Standing by the river's brink, I lifted my voice in mourning, sigh on sigh heaving in my sorrow. My mind is distraught. I forget where I am going. My soul goes wandering off high into the air. My heart within me yearns in sadness. My longing spirit speeds on its way alone. Lament. When I think of my native land, my heart uncertain falters. The daylight turns to dusk. My mind with sorrow darkens. I have left the city for the east. What have I now to hope for? Slanderers have banded together to bring me to this pass. To go ever onwards like the river, that shall my heart's desire be. I turn and gaze on the road to the city, to which I shall never return. 3. Yuan Si, or Embittered Thoughts. My thoughts are overcast with bitter care, my will frustrated but unyielding. I lie in wretchedness until the dawn, and at the sunset hour begin long griefs. I pity the orphan child in an empty house. I grieve for the piteous fledgling trapped in a blasted willow. The mother bird, bereaved, cries out on the high wall, while pigeons coo content, roosting in bosky trees. Like a monkey lost in the dark depths of the forest, I have been cast off and banished far away. The traveler wearily walks along the highway, while his wife eats out her heart in anxious longing. I have shown good faith and truth without ever failing. My nature was as pure as silk from the bleaching. My brightness rivaled that of the sun and moon. My art excelled in luster the brilliance of jade and gems. My pain is smothered and may not be told. My thought submerged and not to be expressed. The lingering fragrance in the end must die. The fame I had dispersed, its luster dimmed. Headlong I drove away from the gate of jade, to find instead ill fame and bring on myself derision. Like Guan Longfeng, whose head fell from his body, and Prince Bi Gan, who was cut up and made into pickles. I, who cared only for my country's safety, earned only enmity and hatred for my pains. Concerned that the state was falling to destruction, I reaped reproach and wove a chain of woe. Since the filth of the blue bottle cheats the eye with its hue, and Li Ji of Jin turned devotion into hate, I feared that by climbing the steps I might be endangered, and drew back to the farthest end of the hall. The afflicted courtier lifts up his voice in plaint, for this present reign is rank, its weeds neglected. Braving displeasure, I boldly expostulated, but for my pains was held guilty, and looked on with suspicion. Parsley and pallia are choked with weeds. Nothosmyrnium soaked in a muddy ditch. Fragrant angelica drowned in a stinking pool. Carved rhinoceros horn is left in a bamboo box. Tang Xi is grasped now for chopping straw with, and ganjiang wielded for carving meat. Foul marshweeds are treasured in pouches of leopard skin, while Jinghe's jade is smashed up for builders' rubble. The times are foul and turbid, past purifying. The age is in confusion that none can see a way through. I wish I could calmly wait for a better time to come, but I fear that my years are too far advanced already. I would bend my principles and go with the stream, but my heart cleaves tightly to them and will not let me. Better, perhaps, to float on the Yuan and ride along its waters, and go down the Xiang and the river, tossed and turned by the current. Lament. The cartwheels creak in the mountains. My heart is torn with longing. The traveler hurries, distracted, not knowing where he can rest. Aimlessly roaming in the wilds, in lonely desolation, I will race my stallions a while, to ease my sorrowful feelings. If I carried my old bones back to my homeland, there are none there I could talk to. Taking a long farewell, I leave on my far journey and drift away on the Xiang. 4. Yuan Shi, or going far away. My thoughts are gloomy and dejected. In loneliness I grieve, nursing my bitter wrongs. My bosom confused like a tangled skein, my tears running fast like meal from the grinders. Choking with long-suppressed emotion, I look to high heaven to justify me. Convoke the 5 peaks and the gods of the 8 quarters. Question the 9 bright shiners and the 6 holy ones. I summon the fixed stars to present my case, charge the 5 lords to take my deposition. The North Star is my arbitrator, and the Great Unity is my assessor. They bade me keep to the true course of the yin and the yang, to cleave to the central harmony of earth, to hang at my girdle the coiling green dragon, to wear at my belt the sinuous rainbow serpent. I must trail behind me the flashing broom star, cling to the firebird and the bird of paradise, rove the clear void of pure divinity, dress in flowing garments of cloud. Jade should my whip be, my banner scarlet, fringed with the dusky moon-bright pearls, a great rainbow flag like an awning above me, and pennants dyed in the hues of the sunset. My body was pure and without blemish, after my peerless father's fashion. Grieved by the failure of all my past endeavors, I breasted the Mi Lo to pass beneath its waters. but the swelling billows bore me to the south side. I drifted along the Jiang and Xiang with the current, entered the Marquess of Yang's deep surging waters, passed down the rocky rapids, and climbed a little island. The steep towering bank shut off my view of heaven. The lowering clouds hid the prospect before me, and the mountains rose up sheer, seeming to have no end. Towering height upon height, they seemed to press down upon me. Snow fluttered thickly down, blanketing the trees. The massed clouds gathered more densely as they descended. The narrow cliffs rose up somber and threatening, their rocks sharp and jagged, shutting off the sun's light. I sorrowed for my old home, and anger rose within me. Too long, oh too long, I had left my native land. I turned my back on the Dragon Gate and entered the great river, climbed a high mound, and looked out to Sha Chou. Turning my boat athwart the stream, I crossed the Xiang River. There was a singing in my ears. My mind was dazed. The waters billowed all about me, and the swell rose up, heaving and boiling. The journey was so long there seemed to be no ending. I wandered this way and that, not knowing where I went. I took the sun and moon as guides to find where the north lay, and rested a little while to clear my thoughts. The waves rolled onwards into the dark distance. To east and west nothing could be discerned in the gloom. So following wind and waves, I drifted southward. The mists closed about me with the darkness of night. Somberly, the sun in the west was declining. The road stretched far ahead, full of difficulties. I thought with a stoup of wine to solace my care, but my throbbing anxieties would not leave me. Lament. The wandering wind whirls, and the dust flies up in eddies. Flowers and trees wave and fall. The season grows sere and sad. Ruin and disaster are my lot, not to be averted. Long I sigh and moan, and my tears fall unconstrained. By unburdening my heart in verse, I hoped I might escape, but my powers fail, and I drift farther and farther in exile. 5. Liu Xiang, or Lament for the Worthy. When I read the Li Sao of Master Chu, my heart is heavy with sorrow for him. My voice complains in the lonely silence, and I turn to my groom, plunged too in gloomy sadness. He struck out at slander and righted infamy, cut out the foul canker from current custom, washed off the stains of sinful impurity, wiped out the vile and brutish uncleanness. He laid sweet scents in his bosom, melilotus he held in his hand, wore at his girdle the fragrant hemlock parsley. Pepper and pallia filled his hands. His virtue raised him above the floating clouds. He climbed up Changling and surveyed the world about him, gazed down on beds of angelica, row on row. He wandered through banks of orchids and clumps of melilotus, and glanced up at the jagged rocks of jade. The choice flowers he flaunted shone with glittering radiance, rich and heavy their perfume, spotless their beauty. He wove the cassia branches' delicate spray with melilotus and lily magnolia. Such were his blossoms, yet they found no favor. Cast out in the wilds, they wilted and died. He pursued Zi Qiao to become his acolyte, and Shun Tu Di, who cast himself in the deeps. He was like Xu You and Bo Yi in unspotted goodness, or Jie Zi Tui, who hid himself in the mountain, or Shun Sheng of Jin, who met a hapless end, or Jing He, who wept tears of blood, or Shen Shu of Wu, who had his eyes gouged out, or Prince Bi Gan, who was wrongfully rejected. He wished to humble himself and abase his body, but his mind recoiled and never would submit. Since square and round are unlike and do not fit together, the angle and the line have different dispositions. I should like to wait a little until a better time comes, but the day is getting dark and draws towards the evening. Time steals on, remorseless, with ever-advancing step. The years pass swiftly by in perpetual revolution. Would I falsely compromise and make my peace with the world? The day within is closed and will not open to me. Would I wait for the world's ways to grow pure and clean? The fog only grows the denser until it is like a dust storm. If I advance with the pigeon's timorous movements, slanderers rise up like a screen to bar me. If I quietly follow the fashion's fluctuations, they are still suspicious and force me to retire. My mind is distracted and in a turmoil, my feelings disordered and full of bitter grief. I pluck the wild fig on the mountain moorland, gather wild persimmons in the river islet. Sighing and weeping, I gaze towards Gao-chu, sobbing with grief and ceaselessly yearning. Who more anxious than I to shoulder the burden? But the red sun is sinking to his setting. Lament. The Jiang and Xiang with teeming waters race ever onwards on their way. In a great turmoil, they heave their waves up, surging with a sudden fury. With careworn heart, I toss and turn, afflicted with heavy sadness. My resentments find no outlet. Always I must hide my anger. It is my lot to meet misfortunes. There is nothing that I can do. My laboring heart is full of woe, and my tears fall down in streams. 6. Yo-ku, or saddened by sufferings. Alas, my heart is heavy, mourning for my native land's misfortunes. 9 years now I have left it without returning. Alone I go on my lonely way to the south. When I think of the ways that are now my country's fashion, my mind rejects them with shame and confusion. I wander beside the wilderness, crying into the wind, walk slowly through the mountain glens. I follow the marsh flats' winding channels, silent in somber desolation. I rest on a rocky ledge and weep. Sad and distressed, there is no joy in my life. I climb a high peak and long stand staring, straining for a glimpse of Nanjing. The mountains continue far into the distance. Long, long is my road. It seems to go on forever. I hear the black cranes crying in the morning on the towering summits of the lofty mountains. Alone with my growing anger, by turns glad and grieving, I hover through the islets singing softly. 3 birds came flying from the south. I marked their constancy and wished to follow northwards. I wanted the 3 birds to take a message for me, but they left with a start and I was too late to catch them. I should like to abandon my resolve, to forget my constancy, but my heart is bound fast and has never yet been shifted. Outwardly idle wanderer, gazing on the passing scene, inside I am all regrets and pent-up grief. I should like for a little while to forget my sorrow, but my heart is too impregnated with care. I should like by music's aid to find relief from sadness, but my thoughts are tied in a tangle that nothing can untie. Sadly, I sang the Li Sao to give vent to my feelings, but I could not get to the end of Zhang, for the long sobs rose in my throat and choked me, and the tears collected and ran down in streams. It grieves me that shining pearls should be cast out in the mire, while worthless fisheye stones are treasured in a strongbox. Proud stallions are treated as if they were pack mules, and dapple gray classed as a broken-down hack. Weeds overrun and choke the cassia bushes. Owls roost in the magnolia trees. Stupid bigots hold forth in the hall and temple, while the great and magnanimous are banished to the mountains. The xiao-xiao music of Shun is execrated. The vulgar whirling chu is held in high esteem. The cauldrons of Zhou are sunk in southern rivers. A clay pot is heated in the midst of the hall. The good man's heart cleaved to the old ways, but he was not able to maintain them. Turning into the southward going highway, a traveler now, he journeys through the night. Homesick, he thinks of the road to Ying, and turns his head back with longing glances. The streams of snivel join in one channel, and the tears run down his face like rain. Lament. I climbed a mountain and long stood gazing, grieving in my inmost heart. Verdant were the greens of the landscape, but I wept as though my heart would break. Loath to tear myself away, I looked back northwards, all bedewed with my tears. My spirit is broken and my pride crushed. I am stuck fast beneath the flood. I think of my loneliness. Whom can my soul seek? My groom is bewildered. We drift like wandering water. 7. Min Ming, or grieved by this fate. Of old, my noble father in his magnanimity loved to raise the able and glorify the good. Unblemished was his heart without impurity. Lofty was his nature without any blame. He banished the glib-tongued and the sycophantic, reproved the slanderers and the fawning favorite. But ever he loved the loyal and true, and esteemed the honest. He summoned the good to him, the wise and intelligent. Great was his mind beyond estimation. Calm was his heart like a deep pool. The crooked fled from him, and could find no entrance. The true could not leave, even if they sought retirement. He drove the paramours out of the council chamber, but welcomed the goddess Fu Fei from the Yi Luo River. He rooted out slanderous knaves from the central courtyard, but chose Lu Wang and Guan Zhong out of the bushland. Under the greenwood was no wronged gentleman. On the river's banks were no exiles in hiding. The San Miao and their kind were driven into banishment. Yi and Gao and their sort filled the king's houses. But now the clothing's outsides are worn as a lining, and the lower garment goes on the upper body. Song Wan is cherished between the two pillars, and Zhou and Shao cast out among the far barbarians. The wonder horse is sent away and put to work the mill. The ass and mule are harnessed for post-swift traveling. The maiden of Tsai is dismissed from the bedchamber. The Rong wife installed and dressed in embroidered silks. Qing Ji is imprisoned in a deep dungeon. Chen Bujan goes to war and is sent to raise sieges. The sounding bell Qin of Bo Ya has been broken. They hold a Qin Zheng now and strike its jangling strings. Chips of white marble are treasured in brazen coffers. Jacinth is thrown out into the courtyard. Han Xin is hidden among the rank and file, while a private commands and leads assaults on cities. Flowering rush and hemlock parsley are cast away in the marshes' ayats. Gourds and calabashes lie worm-eaten in baskets. The unicorn flees into the marshes. Bears gather and romp inside the palace gardens. The fragrant bough and the jeweled spray are broken. Thorn bushes and kindling wood are planted in their stead. Iris, melilotus, and freesia are uprooted. Wild bean and zingiber assiduously hoed. Sad that the men of this age are so unequal, some so short-sighted and some so far-seeing, some so obtuse that they have no comprehension, some of clear vision who cannot win a hearing. It grieves me that I was born out of my time, to endure afflictions and meet with reproach. Even though I fearlessly utter all my mind, my prince is ill-disposed and sure to silence me. Truly, I grieve that my delicate-scented blossoms should be by him accounted evil-smelling. Because of the fragrant cassia I cherished in my bosom, I have fallen upon troubles and had to bear insults. Lament. The good old king is dead and will return no more. In the mountains, dark and precipitous, the road to Ying is long. After the slanderer's subtle words, who can win a hearing? The traveler without a bourne has no one he can talk to. but at each step he heaves a sigh, each sound more dolorous than the last. Sadness and grief inside his breast, utterly disconsolate. 8. Si Gu, or Sighing for Olden Times. How dark the deep forest is, beneath the trees' dense shade, and the serried mountains are broken and sheer, their peaks obscuring the light of day. Alas, my heart is in despair, and my eyes are blinded with brimming tears. The wind whistles sadly, swaying the trees, and the scurrying clouds are crooked and curled. Sad that my life is bereft of gladness, I sorrow afflicted in mountain and wild. In the morning I wander on the long hill's bluff, in the evening I fearfully go to my lone rest. My hair hangs disheveled and tangled on my shoulders. My body is sick and spent with toil. My soul in wild haste goes fleeting southwards. Tears soak my bosom and wet my sleeves. My longing heart finds none to unburden to. My mouth is stopped up, I cannot speak. I have left behind my old quarter in Ying City, crossed the Yuan and Xiang, and moved to a distant region. I think how my homeland has been brought to ruin, and the ghosts of my ancestors robbed of their proper service. I grieve that the line of my father's house is broken. My heart is dismayed and laments within me. I shall wander a while upon the sides of the mountain, and walk about upon the river's banks. I shall look down whistling on the deep waters, wander far and wide, looking all about me. By composing the subtle words of the Li Sao, I hope to recall the fair one to his senses, so that he summons my chariot back to Nanjing, to drive once more in the tracks we used to follow. The road is long, the removal difficult, but alas, my poor heart will not desist. The others have turned their backs on the laws of the 3 and the 5, abandoned the great plan's mighty rules. Discarding square and compass, falsifying measures, casting aside the balance and weighing as they fancy. He who cleaves to the ink line finds himself rejected. Those who stoop are favored and kept in close attendance. The pear tree withers among the tall grasses. The thorn bush is planted in the midst of the court. Shi Shi is banished to the north chambers, the ill-favored cluster at each side of the throne. Wu Huo is cherished and drives the royal horses. Duke Xiao of Yan is made to work in the stables. Kuai Gui mounts up in the holy temple. Gao Yao is cast out into the wilds. Observing these things, I heave a long sigh. I should like to mount up the steps, but feel too uncertain. So I ride the white waves, my high-stepping coursers, bidding a long farewell as I float into the distance. Lament. Up and down I wander on the black hillside. Underneath are the Mir's deep waters. A long time I pause on the banks of the Han, my tears all the while in torrents falling. Now that Zhongzi and Bo Ya are dead, for whom can one make music? Now that Xian Yu will no more drive, how can one show one's feelings? Sadly I sigh with mounting grief. My heart is reft and torn. I look back at Gao Chu, and my tears fall in a shower. 9. Yuan Yo, or the far-off journey. Alas, my nature cannot be altered. Repeated punishments cannot sway it. Clothed in bright raiment, different from the vulgar. Lofty in mien, towering above the rest. Like Wang Chao riding upon the clouds, or charioting the sunset across the courts of heaven. My years shall equal those of the earth and sky, my splendor be like that of the sun and moon. I ascended Kunlun and turned my face northwards, and bade the immortals muster and come to visit me. I chose attendant spirits in the land of great darkness, mounted to heaven's portals by the dark gate mountain. I turned about my chariot and guided it to westward. I raised up my rainbow flag at the Jade Gate. I drove my 6 dragons to the Mountain of 3 Perils, and assembled the 4 gods on the ninefold shore. I raced my chariot on the western mountains, crossed the flying valley and journeyed to the south, traversed the great plain and sped straight onwards, passed by Ju Rong in the Scarlet Sea. My jade yoke bar buckled in the burning heat, my 2 hub guards bent in the pool of heaven. I plunged through the towering spray, making my way eastwards, tethered my 6 dragons to the Fusang tree. When I had seen all the sights within the 4 seas, I determined to fly aloft, ascending and descending. I summoned all the gods together at the revolving pole. To marshal them, I raised up the many-colored rainbow. Drawn by phoenixes, skywards I soared, leading a train of black cranes and jiaoming birds. Peacocks came flying to welcome and escort us. I sent off a flight of swans to the Dipper's handle. I flung open God's palace and his heavenly park, ascended the hanging garden whose brightness blinded me. I twisted a jeweled branch to twine in my girdle. I stood Chang'eng above us to replace the daylight. I trampled the startling thunder, banished the dreadful lightnings, bound up the evil spirits and tied them to the pole star. I lashed the wind god and made him ride before me, imprisoned the dark spirit in the pit of night. I rode in the high wind's face, hither and thither. I wandered gazing all over the north. There I came to Zhuanshu and laid my plaint before him, and examined Xuanming on Kongsang Mountain. I turned my chariot about and journeyed to Chongshan, and made my report to Yu Xun at Sangwu, crossed in a willow boat to Guiji, and came upon Shenshu among the 5 lakes. Then, when I saw the ways that prevailed in Nanying, I cast my body into the Yuan's waters. I gaze on my native land so blackly benighted. The turbulence of the times shows no abatement. I held in my bosom fragrant orchids and iris, but they enviously plucked them from me and crushed them. I spread out crimson hangings for my lord's greater splendor, but a puffing wind blew them up and concealed me from his eyes. The sun, in a red glow, goes to his western lodgings, and from his fiery brightness looks back on the world. I wish I could steal some time for a little pleasure, yet with what anxieties I am afflicted. Lament. He was as the cloud dragon, floating in watery vapors like a dense mist, billowing formlessly, with thunder roll and lightning flash, high aloft he races, mounting the void, treading the dark sky, spurning the turbid vapors, swimming in the clear ones, he enters the house of God. Shaking his wings and beating with his pinions, racing the wind, driving the rain, he wanders without end.